Empower employees with the modern learning and AI at the edge. I'm Roberta Patterson, the Analyst Relations Manager at PeopleFluent, and your moderator today. A couple of housekeeping items before we start. We will be recording the webinar and providing a link to the recording afterwards via email. We will also be using the chat feature in our Q&A at the end of the presentation, so feel free to type your questions in at any time during the webinar, and if we can't get to them, we will have the appropriate person reach out to you. We will be playing video during the presentation. The audio will be only available through your computer and not over the phone. We will make sure that you receive a link to the video in case you're unable to hear it. PeopleFluent is a market leader in human resources solutions for the digital enterprise and helps companies build and power a productive workforce. Our talent productivity platform unifies talent acquisition and talent management into a single collaborative experience that attracts the best candidates, helps managers make better decisions, and empowers employees to grow their careers. Next slide, Jeff. Our guest speaker today is Aragon Research founder, CEO, and lead analyst, Jim Lundy. With a 30-year career, there are very few that have his level of expertise and are as engaged and passionate about learning and talent management. Last week, Aragon Research published their highly anticipated Globe for Corporate Learning report, which we will also be sending to registrants of this webinar. This report examines the trends and how companies can leverage learning platforms as an integral role in the employee and customer experience, as well as to drive innovation. This report also examines 21 vendors and their capabilities. PeopleFluent was recognized as a leader by Aragon Research because of the strength of our talent management suite. Also, our social collaboration capabilities, analytics, vertical market expertise, but especially for our video learning features. That is why we have also asked Keizo co-founder and VP of Solutions, Jeff Fizzle, to join us today and to provide his insights. Jeff has been helping Fortune 500 companies deploy video as part of their learning programs for over 12 years. Keizo provides an industry-leading video platform designed for learning and development professionals. Keizo is a subsidiary of PeopleFluent and powers our video capabilities. So let's get started. Take it away, Jim.
Thank you, Roberta. Great to be here today, no matter where you are in the world. It's great to be able to be with the PeopleFluent team and Jeff to really kind of have a fireside chat and talk about some of the key things happening in the learning and talent markets today. So let me go ahead to the next slide.
All right. Thanks, Jim.
Yeah, Jeff, good to have you here. So really one of the things, there's a lot going on in the learning and talent markets. And one of the things I just want to open up with for all the participants, either live or listening to the recording, is that learning is really becoming part of the digital workplace, and it's become part of what we call employee engagement. The big thing that's interesting about the evolution of the learning market is, many people thought it would be subsumed and become literally just an integral part of a talent solution, and it has become that. But the other thing that's happening is that people want more from their learning offerings, and as we talk about this today, they want to be engaged and they want to come to work and be able to learn on the fly with things like video learning that just a couple years ago, as many of you know that are in the business, it was pretty hard to do. So the market's evolved. Many players like PeopleFluent have added some really strong video capabilities, and that's part of the conversation we're going to talk about today in modern learning. But really, the idea here is it's really a 24/7 enterprise. People need to learn and get knowledge on, how to do things just in time. And so as we talk about the different modalities and microlearning and things like that, that's really the overall set of trends. Is it's not one thing, it's a collection of things that are shifting the conversation on learning to the user and away from more of the, how do I administer my learning program? It's really more about how do I deliver great knowledge just in time to both my employees, my customers, and my partners. Go ahead to the next slide. So we got a lot to cover today. We're going to talk about some key workplace trends. And again, Jeff and I are going to be dialoguing on this. We will touch on the technologies, and that's where we're going to show you a cool little video that kind of tries to summarize it in a little over 2 minutes about all the stuff that's going on in the technology front. We are going to spend some time talking about video because video makes a huge difference in delivering knowledge. And to be honest with you, that's one of the things that I think a lot of firms have missed when they talk about their learning programs. You know, they have missed the whole opportunity around video. It's not too late, but it's really what millennials are looking for. So we're going to hit that one pretty hard. Talk about some best practices around modern learning and all the things going on around content, because part of the modern learning story is I need more content and more courses to be able to enhance the skills of my people. So that's our agenda. We got a lot to cover. Let's go ahead and dive in. So the one thing I would talk about relative to this era of work is there's a shift to, you know, both mobility and this topic that you hear about probably every day, even in the news, around artificial intelligence, which we sometimes just call intelligence. And we see that happening in a lot of different eras, but you really can't turn on the TV today and not see an ad for like a Google Home or an Alexa device. Really the shift from basically touching computers for the touch interface to more of a voice type interface, and we think that's coming to learning as well. Not just, and we'll talk about that, but that's really one of the big shifts is, you know, we're leaving kind of like the mobile, you know, basically touch era with, smartphones are 10 years old. Tablets are kind of like pretty standard operating procedures if you have a tablet or not. But this shift to voice interfaces, we predicted several years ago, is on fire. And that means that there's going to be new things like digital assistants that are going to kind of be coming online. And I, would be remiss if I don't say relative to modern learning, we are kind of leaving the LMS-centric era. We think it's really just how do you update and enhance learning infrastructures. We don't think it's a rip and replace. We think it's more augmentation. And that's part of the thing that Jeff and I are going to be talking about is this whole shift to modern learning with, empowering users to share their video content.
So, Jim, that's a good point to kind of jump in. I appreciate that. We hear every day people talking about AI and machine learning and all of these things, but everyone wants to go that way. But when it applies to kind of learning and development professionals, there's still kind of I think you did a good job of saying digital assistants, but do you see it going as far as using those technologies to create new content or create content on demand as people need it? Where do you kind of see other areas of AI and machine learning impacting learning?
Well, it's a great question, Jeff. I mean, we actually are just wrapping up a brand new report on what we call workflow and content automation that's more focused on the document side of the workplace. How do you create the right document for, say a transaction? Now, if you actually look at the original vision of SCORM, which one of the standards out there, along with AICC, of what that was really meant to be was the ability to create a course on the fly that meets the needs of the learner, et cetera. And that never really came to fruition. So I would say that I do think that's one of the 5 to 10 year visions where you will see the automation of an assembly of courses, but probably, probably the first thing that's going to happen is, can I automate the assembly of a video? And as you know, Jeff, you're in the business. That's something that is being talked about. Right now you can do more discovery, scene location. So it is happening in the document side of the business. We think it will come to more rich content down the road. But there's more things that have to happen with the machine learning and integrating that with, for example, authoring tools and things like that that need to happen. So, and I would probably say that to your point on AI is that a lot of people are talking about it. There isn't as much action in the enterprise as a lot of people think because it's still hard to do.
I completely agree. Thank you.
Go ahead to the next slide. So, in 2017, we coined this idea of modern learning. We don't think it's just about an experience, which is you hear some people talking about. We think it is about modernizing the approach to learning, which has to do with both culture and technology, and leveraging a lot of the different things that have been coming online for the last 7 years, whether it's social learning, which, social learning has been around for almost 7 years. Took a while for that to kick in, but, how do I get information and knowledge from others? How can I share ideas and things like that? How can customers do that? Microlearning is a big, big thing, and that's probably talked about one of the, the most, miniature, nuggets of information delivered, whether it's a mini course or a quiz, at the right point in time. We also think the video learning, like I said, that's a big part of the agenda today. Again, I think a lot of people are just realizing that, did I miss out on something? I mean, here's a question for you. Why are so many support organizations putting up videos for customer support? Maybe it's because people learn faster that way. Analytics as well. So when you actually can add predictive analytics, you can start to recognize what users are doing, serve up new courses or new channels. Like, hey, here's a channel that you didn't know about on this particular business topic or IT topic. And so when you actually look at blending both content and technologies together, that's really one of the big essences of modern learning. For many, many years, it was really about the LMS, which is really about the administration, scheduling, launching, and reporting on training activities. And, I've done, many, 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 thousands of inquiries over, the last 15 years with enterprises. And we would always say, look, that's fantastic that you're really focused on getting an LMS, but what are you going to do about content? And so one of the trends in learning is bringing together both, internally developed content, externally purchased content, and new content that's going to be created maybe outside of L&D by users, and that's really where the video part of it comes into play. So, but this story doesn't end. We're going to talk a little bit about how it's evolved in 2018 in just a second, but that's really, and again, one of the big reasons I'll just mention is it's really about knowledge and getting knowledge to people. And if my workforce is more prepared, then I'm generally going to compete better. I mean, the World Cup's going on right now. Probably many of you are probably watching it while you're watching this this recording or actually listening live. And again, when you look at preparation for matches, that's one of the big things. Are they prepared to do that? And so if the workforce is better prepared with knowledge and skills, generally they compete better. So that's really the bottom line. Let's go ahead and go to the next slide. And again, this is really where we talk about know-how and this race to know-how. A lot of the knowledge, below the iceberg graphic you see here is in, employees' heads, also called tacit knowledge. And so when you look at this race to know-how, there's two really competing things, which is people, users, employees, associates, they want more knowledge. It's really one of the biggest things relative to people leaving a company is when they don't have that. Customers want that too. They want simpler customer journeys. The business wants faster outcomes and work results. And really, when you actually look at it, I've showed two images here. That's really one of the things when you say, what's one of the fastest ways to do that? And, I'm going to bring Jeff in here. It's really video. So that's really one of the things when you actually look at the rise of video learning as a trend, it's because people can do so much more in half the time. So if we show you a video on all the trends in talent management and learning in a few slides, that will do more in 2 minutes than I could do in 15. So that's, again, Jeff, I'll just throw that out to you. You're seeing that as well. You've been in, you're the founder, Keizo. You've seen it as well as you've built the Keizo product line over the years too.
Yeah, absolutely. We talk a lot about video not necessarily being a technology, but being a medium. And we believe it's one of the most efficient and effective mediums to communicate outside of being in person with someone. And it's a great way to relay soft skills, social skills, and very technical and complex processes that would be incredibly difficult to do via text or just still images. So it's a great medium to do that. And we love seeing more and more people get comfortable in creating that. I know you're going to talk more about that in a little bit, but that's one of the biggest trends we see, and whatever buzzword you want to use to describe it, of user-generated content, which has been around forever, but the idea that people are getting comfortable enough to turn on their webcam or use their mobile device and create those quick pieces of best practices and knowledge, and they're willing to share that, is the trend that we're tracking the closest to.
Totally agree on that. And you're right, it is, user-generated content has been around for a long time. It's just that, we're still seeing that there's still little uncomfortableness in the enterprise with, wait a minute, what about these users that are generating content? We're going to touch on that more later. But again, this is really one of the things is that video, we think when you talk about a digital enterprise, that video becomes one of those transformational pieces of content. It's not the total story, as you know, because there's different types of training approaches based on what you're trying to teach. But it is something that's very good for certain types of things, for example, such as routines and processes and how-tos. Let's go ahead to the next slide. So one other thing we just throw out relative to this whole thing on AI, and we're talking about digital assistants and chatbots, we do think that there's going to be, again, from providers over the next 3 to 4 years of the rise of learning assistants. That, basically a knowledge assistant that helps an associate, it might help a customer or a partner with knowledge acquisition. So right now, if you look at this graphic, today a lot of the tools out there that are horizontal are basically voice search. Alexa, do this. Siri, show me the score of the World Cup. But when you get to full language in action, we're all the way up by 2021, that's when these digital assistants come online. But there will be different types of them. So we're predicting the rise of a learning assistant, something that either, can basically help you find something like find the video that would help me fix the lawnmower, or find the video that shows me how to do a better customer engagement, when they're doing troubleshooting. And those types of things are being built right now. And again, not that much going on quite yet, but this is just a glimpse into the future. For example, just to throw it out there, some of the major cloud companies have opened up their architecture so I can plug in, an Alexa for Business into, for example, my learning system and ask it questions and say, how many people took that course, and it could answer. Now, that's some IT development. But we know people that are doing that right now where they've said, yeah, we just got a pilot and we've got some of our interns working on it. I'd also throw out, we don't have a poll question here, but we had interns here at Aragon last summer. And we, let's put it this way, July holidays coming up in the United States. Last year, we did not give the interns July 3rd off. So yours truly had to come into the office and work with them. And we had a drone and we did an intern lunch and all that fun stuff because, nobody would know the clients were working. And then we said, what else do you want to do? I said, let's build a chatbot. And so when you actually look at building something that can start to do things like answer basic questions, in talent or support, they're very easy to build, a basic non-intelligent one. We had one talking in about 3 hours. So when you actually talk about this whole thing, this could be a fun innovation or, innovation hack to say, hey, let's use some of the free tools that are out there, and let's go see if we can start to build, some of the, for example, Q&A relative to a particular knowledge topic and have a competition amongst some different teams to go and build one. So I just say that we did it a year ago. We're actually going to do it again this summer with some of our new interns and see how much further we get. You'd be surprised how far you can get with that. But again, this is a trend. We think many of the providers you work with today, like People will be on this track to go and build these for you. But we think this is something that's it's coming, and you can already see it in consumer world today, but it is coming. Jeff, any comments on this?
It's coming fast, and we're already doing it. I mean, so Amazon has the Lex API, Google has the same one, IBM has the Watson API. They've exposed all these services out there, and for the majority of use, it's almost free. And when you hit certain thresholds, it's pennies per word. And the rate that it can come back at and the accuracy it's coming back at is spectacular. we hedged it for a long time before we kind of made it part of the product because we were worried about the reliability of it. But it's out there now, and it's fun to see it like even get better. So we do a lot with speech to text within video, and there's a lot of people that talk about SCORM. And forever we saw it spelling it SCORE. And just in the last couple of weeks, like it's learned. It's now doing it correctly. And it's really fun to kind of see that happen, and it's happening in real time. And you're able to take advantage of these superpowers, and we won't go into quantum computing, but all of them are using quantum computers, which are incredible and faster than anyone could ever do. So it makes so much sense to take advantage of what these big companies are providing out there.
Totally, totally. It's a great topic. So this is an area to watch and maybe take action on too. Let's go to the next slide. So by the way, this is put it all in context. So this is really in a year, so much has changed where we kind of teed up the idea of the shift to modern learning mid-year 2017. We got a lot of coverage out of that. And now we're teeing up the idea of modern learning infused with what we call intelligence at the edge. It doesn't really mean, when you actually talk about adding these assistants, it really doesn't mean that you have to change what you already have. It means you need to open up access to it so it can do things like, it's basically doing search for you automatically. And so whether it's an onboarding assistant, a learning assistant we just talked about, we've worked with clients on building help desk chatbots, kind of a trend in support to basically take all the Q&A and automate it with a bot. Career coach is also a new thing that we've actually started tracking on our technology arc. But eventually, in almost every business area in the enterprise, you are going to have an intelligence layer. And so that's one of the things we're calling out, that this is something that is going to be happening because so much of learning is involved with content, and we're actually tracking intelligent content analytics as an overall trend. And as more firms like PeopleFluent add some of the content analytics into their platforms, then it will actually be able to do discovery for you. And again, recommendations, a lot of people already do that today, but it will be kind of like recommendations on steroids, so you could not only understand what your team members are doing, but it may expose things to you that you didn't know about. And then if I can talk to it, then that makes it even better. So again, AI at the edge overall is a trend. It's coming pretty fast. And again, some firms are doing prototypes. But, you know, for example, one of the takeaways I would just suggest as a learning experience is, hey, how about if I got my team some of the free courses on the basics of how machine learning works? That's one of the things that's easy. There's a lot of free courses out there. So if you're in IT and you're responsible for development, I should be offering some of those free AI-based courses so I can help my business teams figure out how to do some of these things a little bit easier. And by the way, it's not that hard. You'd be amazed how quick some of these engines can actually learn what people are doing and then start to, you know, adapt. Let's go to the next slide. All right, so again, nice little comment here relative to this shift. So we, in 2013, made a prediction that by 2018, that video content, as far as new content, would start to overtake text content. And all trends right now point to this. When you look at, you know, all the demand you're seeing from consumers, so, you know, Snapchat has 10 billion videos shared a day via their platform. And, you know, if you actually talk to any of the millennials at your enterprise, you ask them if they use Snap. Yeah, why do you use Snap? Well, it doesn't take up storage on my phone, but it's also really easy to use. And so then you've seen Instagram and Facebook kind of copy that approach where it makes it easier to share rich engagement information. And, you know, that's where you actually look at young people saying, how do they learn? They go to YouTube or Vimeo or whatever, and they find a video on how to do something, or even to take, you know, math courses and things like that. So there's a huge shift here, and that's really why, you know, people like, you know, PeopleFluent and Keizo have seen, you know, increased demand for their productivity platform. You know, we're seeing as well, we've made a big shift at Aragon. You know, you'll see the results of that, but, you know, we're doing visual research because we had got so much feedback from clients like, hey, well, you did some of that, you should do more of that. So it's a trend that's coming from consumer to enterprise. We think this is one of the tipping point years. And Jeff, I'm going to throw it over to you to see what some of your observations are on this momentum shift.
Yeah, absolutely, Jim. I mean, so for years we've known each other and talked about like video enabling courses as part of it, and that's something I'm sure everyone on this webinar has probably already done. They've used a GOMO, an Articulate, a Storyline. They put a video as part of a course, and they're like, great, I'm doing video learning now. But what we've seen is that shift more to, I've heard you and read you say stuff about kind of the corporate Netflix or corporate YouTube sort of scenario of being able to replicate that, making it easy for people to create that content, and then even easier to find it. So those trend lines, I completely agree with you, and I'm happy those lines are finally crossing.
Yeah, it's been a long journey, and you know, it's interesting, just to build on what you said, is one of the things we're starting to see as well is that the business users are demanding that IT make sure that they can support the things that they need for internal, webcasts and things like that, or customer webcasts, because sometimes IT has been kind of a little bit of a barrier, but the user demand is not going to go away. And, you know, even this week I was in an Uber, and the driver had the World Cup on his mobile phone, which I don't think was that cool, but I'm like, dude, you're watching the World Cup while you're driving? He goes, yeah. He goes, that's probably not a good idea, but people are watching, video on their mobile device because they can.
I'm glad I wasn't in that Uber with you.
All right, let's go to the next slide. Another thing that ties into this whole trend around visual is this augmented reality. A lot of the mobile carrier operating system providers like Google, Android, Apple with ARKit are making it easier to have an augmented layer on top of the physical layer, so that when I need to do something like either look at a design or, more importantly, figure out how to fix something where maybe somebody can be looking through my glasses at what I'm seeing as a technician and giving me instructions on what to do, or the AR images will actually start to guide you where you should insert the new part, relative to the transmission or something like that. So there are a number of interesting, fun things that again, the phone companies are doing to try to get you to buy new phones, like emojis, that are more animated. But we're starting to see on the industrial side two real big things. One is training, and the other one is service. So that's one to watch, and it really just kind of builds out that whole thing. It's a form of video learning that is augmented, but training is going to be one of the big things. And again, it's just, it's really a form of micro-learning. If the technician can't fix a sports car, but they can have an augmented experience with a technician remotely that combines both video with AR, augmented reality, then they get the car fixed faster. So again, it gets back to that whole idea of it's driving that time to outcome, which means the car gets back on the road, the customer's happy, they didn't have to ship the car away. So a lot of really positive things here. And again, this is coming. It's going to get easier and less expensive. Some of the glasses are getting much less expensive. You don't have to wear the big headsets anymore. So again, something to watch as a trend. Okay, so we're going to come back to this. So this is the tech arc for learning and human capital management. I'm kind of showing this as a preview. What we're going to do now is we're going to actually play a video that talks to this, and then we'll come back and do a little bit of a recap. So instead of me talking through the whole thing about what this is, let's go ahead, Jeff, and roll the video.
All right, I'll go ahead and hit play. Just to reiterate what Roberta said earlier, just make sure your computer speakers are unmuted. The audio is going to play through the computer speakers. Enjoy. All right. If it didn't play for everyone all the way through, we'll make sure we send a link out afterwards.
Okay, great, Jeff. So really, just this again, this is Jim. This is kind of a quick recap. One of the things I just want to tell you, we've been doing these technology arcs is trying to show both adoption and maturity of technologies for the last 7 years. One of the things I would just tell you that's interesting, because we have both business and IT leaders and CLOs as clients. The business side, when they call us and ask questions about something like this, they're actually looking at the left-hand side of the arc. What are the things that are really driving, HCM and talent? And guess what? When you look at some of these things, I highlighted, some of the AI stuff, but predictive hiring, micro-learning, video learning, there's also even sales coaching and learning. So people are saying, hey, if I go and add those, then I can make my overall corporate learning offering, I can relaunch it, it can be completely better. And Jeff, this is one of the things I think, with KnowHow and PeopleFluent, that's been quietly kind of like an extreme makeover over the last couple of years with your productivity platform.
Yeah, thank you for calling that out. We believe that as well. We hadn't been heard of as extreme makeover before, but I like it. We'll take it.
Well, I mean, I guess, we'll talk about that more when we look at the globes. Let's keep going. So look, some of the things that are, when we talk about these modalities of modern learning, there are some differences that really start to stand out in certain use cases. For example, in sales coaching and learning, this idea of just in time. I need to have some information delivered to me before a call. So this has been a trend in life sciences for a couple of years where it's kind of like, if you're an L&D professional, you'd say it's basically like a quiz, like, hey, here's some information. I want to make sure you understand, and it may quiz you a little bit, and it's going to track it. And then it'll be able to report and say, in this region, they really weren't as prepared as the other region. The other one is skill building. So when you actually talk about a lot of the emerging providers, what you hear a lot is skills. Now look, skills is not new. People that are running learning development programs, it's always been about skills. But the new thing relative to skill building is adding more content to be able to enhance the number of skills that can be enhanced and to be able to do that quickly. Again, interactive, we're talking about that relative to video. And then last but not least, mobile first. So it's not good enough to be able to do the web experience. I got to be able to do my training on the go. So if I'm doing that just in time, I'm in my car and I've got my mobile phone, I don't have my computer open, can I get some of those knowledge nuggets delivered to me on my phone right before I walk into the call? Because I only have sometimes with a doctor 3 to 8 minutes to get my points across. And if it's a new drug, what are those key things? What are the summary key points I need to be able to talk to before I go on that call? So that's a great example of just in time that's really starting to make a difference in some of these complex industry type things where you have to have that knowledge. And again, sometimes it's hard to remember. And the only thing I'd point out is when you actually say, maybe even the week before I go out on my sales blitz, if I've got a couple of videos that also reinforce that, I'm going to have some massive recall that we'll talk about in just a second relative to having watched that video. So that's really the key thing about video learning. We think video learning is part of the digital enterprise. I'll be honest, in many enterprises, it's a missing link. So there may be great corporate communications that's packaged and a lot of money spent on it. You don't have to spend as much money creating videos as you might think. In many cases, it's some of these newer emerging editing tools that make it easy. And also, I mean, the transcoding and things like that. But there's a lot of reasons why you, as L&D professionals, talent management professionals, or business leaders, need to look to leverage video. What is one of the big ones? The biggest one is retention. Up to 80% of the videos you've seen in the last 30 days, you can remember what you saw. So whether it's watching, again, one of the World Cup matches, your favorite episode of whatever TV series you like, If I asked you, if we were doing a one-on-one chat right now, I said, tell me what happened in the most recent episode of Westworld, you could probably tell me what happened, because of that, again, we've been, on the cognition side, we've been kind of trained to be visual. Almost half our brain is visually oriented, and so when I'm watching a video, I get that recall for up to 30 days. And by the way, the big thing also for millennials is people love that, and customers love that too. If I can solve their problem with a simple, 60-second video, I'm probably going to be happier as a customer. My journey is going to be better. And so there's a lot of really interesting ways that people are seeing that. And again, sometimes it's just getting started. Now, Jeff, you've been doing this with a lot of your customers for many years. What are some of the things you've seen once people, the light bulb goes on and they kind of get that it's not that hard to really get started with this?
Yeah, I mean, that you hit a trend, and that is definitely it. There's a little bit of resistance up front on the creation side, but once people get over that, the floodgates open, and it's finding good ways to curate, manage, and discover that content. The other thing that I wanted to add in there that I think is another key component of metrics is actually understanding the behavior of the users. So text-based, document-based training, you knew if someone looked at the document, you maybe knew how long they spent on a slide. But in video, you know exactly what's being said at the moment they're watching, and you know those words. And you can relate those words of what's being said to patterns in the viewing behavior. So if a lot of people are watching a section over and over again, you know exactly what's being discussed there, and you can probably figure out why. In a training video, it's confusing, or you need to elaborate on it. And the flip side of that is seeing what people skip and don't look at. Whereas with text, you can't tell what they're doing on that part of it. So it becomes a great form of analytics to always use that to generate better content.
Cool. Yeah, lots to talk about. Not as hard as you might think, so let's go ahead and keep going. Let's go to the next slide. Well, by the way, here's one of the, again, action item, what to leave here with. First of all, the spending on learning content and content overall is going to be massive. We're seeing, we think upwards of $600 billion this year spent on all forms of content in the enterprise. Much of that is training content or product launch content. And much of that relative to the new spending is going to be about packaging some of the user-generated video content. So a couple key actions we would just throw out is developing some of those video creation and skills. How do you add a producer that can basically maybe take that content from a user and put a title on it, help them polish it up, learning how to do storyboarding. If you're new, developing a partnership with outsourcers, but really number 3 is very critical. You have to embrace the user-generated content. Maybe pick a team that's doing a lot. For example, in sales, role plays are very, very important, and so sales leaders are not waiting. They are basically leveraging, send me a video right now of you doing this role play, and I need it by the end of the day, 3, 2, 1, go. And the sales reps have to do a recording of themselves and submit it to their boss, either with a platform or without. And then the last thing, really, deploying a scalable platform. And again, Keizo is part of PeopleFluent, but they've had an enterprise video platform for years. That's really one of their strengths, is at the platform level. So preparing for the future. So when I was with some chief learning officers recently, I asked them, I said, if you had 1,000 videos next week, could you get them deployed? Yes. If you had 5,000 in a couple of weeks, could you? Probably. What if you had 50,000 videos in 3 months? Would you be able to handle that? No. What if you had 5 million videos in 2 years? And they said, well, we need a video platform. So that's really when you start looking at this avalanche and this growth. It's not going to slow down. Remember that little factoid. 10 billion videos on Snap a day. What does everybody bring to work every single day? They have this little thing called a smartphone. It has a camera on it. People are very comfortable with doing selfies and selfie videos or just recording something. So what if they learned how to do it a little more efficiently, and then you could capture that knowledge, because basically what they're showing is a piece of knowledge. So again, a couple illustrations there, but I mean, again, that's why you start to see the growth of that content. And the only flip side of that is if people are doing that, you know, in the B2C space, you know, again, how to fix a lawnmower engine, how do I do that in my enterprise? And many leading cloud software companies are starting to do more of their video, their support with videos. So again, you know, it's not as hard as you think. Sometimes it's just taking that action, but really, it's really not today. It's really almost like you have to kind of start to do this to kind of keep up with your competitors. And Jeff, I know you're seeing that with some of your customers as well.
Yeah, absolutely. You're saying all the things we say every day and talk with people about. I have a question for you because it's something we get a lot, and I always like hearing your perspective on these sort of things, in that most people on this webinar today probably have a place in their organization to host a video, a content management system of some sort. But I think you hit a really good point of like places to put a video like an LMS versus a video platform. And I don't know if you can elaborate a little bit more on your thoughts and the differences there, because that's usually we have people come to us, I don't want to say when it's too late, but after they hit those pain points. And I'm intrigued with your thoughts on that.
Well, you know, it's interesting because when you actually look at, you know, this evolution of the learning market, you know, PeopleFluent, you know, I mean, they, you know, made an investment in KnowHow and updated, you know, their platform, and others have kind of started to follow suit where, you know, the learning platform has the ability to manage videos. Now, sometimes you can, you know, integrate it with another thing, but that's really one of the things we've seen, and we saw as we talk about the Learning Globe for 2018, there has been a much more significant focus on adding support for rich content into the learning infrastructure, the learning platform. Now, there's many emerging players that are doing a lot of content aggregation with third-party content. They're not doing stuff with video because they don't have any video capabilities. So when you actually step back and say, you know, it's not just about I need to have, you know, a zillion little mini courses, you know, from some of the content providers, that's part of the recipe. The other part of the recipe is, can my enterprise learning provider actually help me manage all this user-generated video content? And that's really one of the things we're starting to see is many more players are starting to say, wait a minute, we need to go do an integration, or we need to, you know, do something. So that's why I kind of say a few years ago, that was, you know, and it used to be called the mirror. PeopleFluent made that major move. I think it's, you know, it's helped you, and again, others are starting to follow suit. So again, there are different ways architecturally to do integrations with existing things, but you know, that's when you start looking. If you're an enterprise, you know, in L&D or talent, that's one of the things you got to say is, are we prepared for this? And if we are not, and our providers are not, is it time for us to bring in another provider?
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I agree with you, and that makes sense. Changing gears a little bit on you, I had another thing that just popped into my mind. We were at a trade show a couple weeks ago, and I got into a conversation with someone about the difference between micro-learning and chunking of content. Do you have any thoughts on that, or what's your perspective there?
Well, you know, the overall trend in content is less is more. So, I mean, if you talk about specifically relative to chunking, you know, that's really where if I have an hour-long course, do I chunk it and, you know, make it into mini modules? On micro-learning, I think the thing I would probably say is some of that is more about just-in-time snippets versus chunking. So, you know, and I think sales and support are really good examples of that, where, you know, for example, you know, there have been examples where somebody can actually share out, they can actually share out, you know, via collaboration, like I'm having trouble with this carburetor or this fuel injection system, and they share a video with their team, and they get immediate comments back. I mean, that's kind of rudimentary, but, you know, the quizzes for salespeople is really more micro-learning, where it's programmed, it's actually using AI. It knows what the person's going to be doing. They have a call, and the topic on the calendar is this. That means this needs to happen. So a subtle difference there relative to chunking versus micro-learning, but that would be the example I would use.
Got it. Thank you. Yeah, it was definitely an interesting discussion to be a part of, for sure. All right.
All right, cool. So, hey, one thing also just on that topic, I mean, this gets at, digital transformation of legacy content, kind of a little bit of a procedure, how to proceed, but a lot of clients we work with have a lot of old content. If it's strategic, you need to do the right-hand side. You need to update and modernize it. If it's not strategic, you know what, that was an old product, that product's being retired, then you probably need to kind of let it go. But notice that part of this whole thing, when you talk about updating it, in some cases, if you had, for example, an instructor document or a how-to guide, could I take that guide and could I make a video out of that, storyboard it, shoot some video, and modernize that whole thing? And so instead of something that takes 10 minutes to read, could I do that in 2.5 to 3 minutes? And to be honest with you, even in the last 7 years, it used to be you had to do under 4 minutes. Now it's basically it's got to be under 2 to 3 minutes, or you lose the audience. And this is again part of that Netflix and YouTube generation. But I might be able to chunk that into part 1, part 2, part 3. So anyway, just some thoughts because, and I also have to say that mobilizing the content as well. Some of that, legacy flash content that you have that's great is not going to run on the mobile devices, and that's really one of the things. Employees are demanding mobile access to their training courses. So again, just some thoughts relative as you start looking at this avalanche of how do I get more content so I can offer more skills, and some of that content is proprietary. You have to kind of do an assessment of where you want to be with that. If it's old and tired and not strategic, dump it, let it go. And if it's really strategic, then you need to.
So Jim, you kind of hit on it briefly, but I want to bring it up again because we get this question all the time around what's the magic number? What's the length of a video that someone's going to watch? Does the length matter? Is it the topic that's covered? Like, what's your perspective on that? Because I've seen lots of different things published, from saying videos need to be less than 30 seconds to saying they can be 20 minutes as long as they're good. So
yeah.
Interested in your perspective.
Well, so for example, if it's for example, an engaging video relative to for example, in sales, if you don't have a short like, hi, this is Jim, and it's 20 to 30 seconds, if it goes longer than that, they're going to click off. If it's more of an informational type thing, like a summarized thing, it can be, 2 to 3 minutes. If it's more entertainment, where it's providing knowledge and entertainment at the same time, like a story, then people tend to watch longer because it's not overtly just pitching this or saying that. So that's why you're starting to see why are all the major providers of that are doing things like social networks, they're starting to invest in entertainment because they want you to actually, and the carriers are doing this, if I have more content that's entertaining, people will watch it longer. So I think you have to look at the content type and the role. There are certainly things today where, again, people will watch a 30-minute TV show. You see more 30-minute, a 60-minute television show is, when you take out the ads, isn't really that long. So yeah. I think that's one of the things you're starting to see, and obviously sporting events as well. But in the enterprise chunking, so if it's an hour-long how-to course, I'm going to chunk that, into maybe 8 segments because it's more digestible, probably more searchable, and also I can do more things. I can say, okay, I've got time to watch these first 2 modules, then I can jump to the 3rd one. So again, different modalities, but shorter is better. And again, one of the story types is if I add some entertainment into the content, I might be able to extend that and maybe even get some better retention.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, this, one of our sister companies now, Leo Learning, creates these incredibly engaging pieces of video content to go over these topics. And it's very highly produced, but the engagement statistics on it are spectacular. So there is a place for that as well.
Yeah, exactly. All right, let's go to the next slide. What we've got here is the 2018 Globe that Roberta just mentioned, just published last week. PeopleFluent was a leader again. And again, that's because we started identifying, as we talked about earlier, what are the criteria, what makes up a modern learning platform. and obviously PeopleFluent had what it takes. There's things like that we looked at, not just the idea of aggregating content, which some emerging players are doing, but it's can they do video learning? And many of the major providers are starting to be able to do that, but there's many that still today do not do that. So I think then you have to start looking at the different elements of modern learning, micro-learning, more content and more video. That you start to see a separation of the stack. So PeopleFluent's going to make this report available to the people that signed up for the webinar. So a lot more in the report that talks to this, but we kind of, in this webinar, we kind of gave you a flyby of some of the things that went into that. And again, there are going to be people that are looking to switch providers because some learning providers have decided that they don't think video is that strategic, and we think it is. All right, so how do you do this? What do you do to get started? First of all, you have to make a decision, as I just said, about is your provider going down the modern platform journey or not? What is your current state of your content? And again, there's in-house content, there's user-generated content that maybe I haven't leveraged, there's third-party content, and then there's sometimes third-party custom content that I contract for. You have to have a content strategy, and then you have to start to roll it out. And again, rebranding your learning initiative, sometimes the new corporate university. Some people have done, for example, they do a video snippet each week, get almost like a talking head. Hi, this is Jim, and today our new corporate university is featuring our brand new how-to content series for this topic, and it features some of our own associates showing you how they do their jobs. Guess what? Some of these jobs are very complex. We've got a video series that's part of that. So you got to do a rollout, you got to market it. And then with analytics, you got to measure that. But again, it starts at what are the modalities we need to be able to deliver? What are the content types that are part of those modalities? For example, if I've got a large sales force and they're selling a complex product, do I need to add just-in-time quizzes to my portfolio and be able to roll that out? So again, just some thoughts there. Trying to chunk it into about basically 4 different things. If you do those things, you're probably going to have a much higher probability of success than not, but don't miss the content step and don't miss the modalities we talked about throughout the webinar. So to wrap, again, modern learning is part of the new digital workplace strategy. Video learning is part of your content strategy. And again, becoming a world-class buyer and producer of learning content, because in many cases you can buy learning content, but as we've said, you also need to start to say, how do we become a producer of that? And guess what? You've got a secret sauce. Your users, some of them are amazing video producers. We've had interns here. We do visual research here at Aragon, just a thought. A couple years ago, we had some interns. We had some high school interns and some college interns. The college interns were majoring in film. Guess what? Some of the high school interns were better at video editing than people that were majoring in college. Why? Well, they've been doing video since they were 7 years old. And so when you say, wow, they were 16, 17 years old, they've been doing video for 10 years, where some of the older people have only been doing video for maybe 5 years. So that's why I think when you start becoming you have users in your enterprise that are world-class experts on video. So that's really what we talk about learning at work. And Jeff, I'm going to turn it back over to you and Roberta for any questions we have.
Sure. Thank you so much, Jim. I really appreciate it. I think I see one that came in from Chris who's watching, and he says, it seems Jim feels that micro-learning is best applied as performance support, a job aid, just in time, not necessarily for learning and training. I'm not sure if you wanted to kind of respond to that. I have some thoughts as well, but I'll let you go first.
Well, I mean, put it away, there are many places where you can deploy micro-learning. For example, a 2-minute video is a micro-learning thing, and that could not just be performance support. So, was not trying to say that that's the only thing, but when you actually look at the payback, that's really one of the areas when you start to see it when, it becomes, just-in-time knowledge delivery. You can call it performance support, but it's really just-in-time knowledge delivery. That really helps you with those time to outcomes and eliminating maybe some of the things like, I can't help you right now, where if I've got the knowledge, oh, guess what, I got the answer, I can help you right now.
Yeah, and we see it both, because sometimes there's a great video clip that's part of a formal course that's in onboarding on how to do something. And the person, as you said, for the just-in-time kind of scenario, doesn't necessarily need to go watch that course again, but they might want to go watch that clip. So being able to get to the content versus the course and is definitely a trend we're seeing, and what users are doing is or customers are exposing it in both places, or even more than 2 places for that matter.
Yeah, totally right. And, again, the other thing that I think is going to happen is, users are discovering their own learning paths by, having more of this content available to them. They may discover, nugget pieces of content and knowledge that they just discovered because it gets exposed to them. So I think that's the other thing is instead of being totally prescriptive with advances in modern learning, users, again, are doing their own learning paths and they're doing self-discovery. And sometimes the content's just exposed to themselves through the analytics.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. Roberta, we have time for one more?
Barely. Is it a short one? Do you see something?
Sure, Jim. We have a lot of people that ask us that how do we help our people create, in quote, good content? There's always the joke, there's no bad questions. There can be bad video. What's something that you see that could help people mitigate that risk? Well,
it's interesting because, if you look at a lot of the principles, and many people, there are a lot of things that courses that teach people how to create a great presentation. I'll be honest with you, there aren't as many great courses on teaching people how to storyboard a video. But if you actually say, how do you do that? If you actually just look at, and again, I got taught myself, when I was doing a lot of marketing on how do you create a great, infomercial, what is the process, and it's called storyboarding. So I think if you can learn how to do the storyboarding relative to producing a video, it's very much like the, how do you create a great presentation. For example, there's a lot of good things out there on how to do a great little mini TED Talk. But again, it's really about what's going to happen in this part of the video, just like what is the key takeaway on a slide. So a lot of the principles, if any of you do presentations, many of the things you do when you create a presentation is really what you apply to creating a great piece of content.
Great, thank you. Go ahead, Roberta. Sorry, we went a little over.
That's okay. I just wanted to say, thank you to our presenters today, Jim and Jeff, and on behalf of everyone at PeopleFluent, thank you for joining us today. We will send you the recording and the Aragon Research Globe for Corporate Learning in the next couple of days. But let's keep this conversation going, and be sure to follow us on LinkedIn and Twitter, and thank you, and have a great rest of your day.
Thank
you all.
Take care.